Hey there, welcome back to Continual, The Comet Never Ends, and The Panel Room. I am not Jason Tondier. I am your host for the night, John Hartness. I am the co-founder and publisher of Falstaff Books, and I talk with my hands. So get used to it. Tonight we're going to talk about the different steps that a book goes through from the moment that it's completed by the writer and it's ready to get out the door. So from pitch to publication, we've brought in some fantastic experts on all of that. So let's let them tell you a little bit about themselves, starting with Lucienne.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lucienne Diver. I'm an agent with the Knight Agency. I've been in the business 27 years now. I started at Spectrum Literary Agency in New York. 12 years ago, I moved to the Knight Agency, and I represent science fiction, fantasy, mystery, suspense, romance, women's fiction, and young adult fiction. There we go.
Nice. So now you guys all know that Lucienne started in the industry when she was 4.
Right.
Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb Dixon, and I have been in publishing since dirt was invented. About 20 some odd years ago, I was one of the co-founders of BelleBooks and its imprint, BelleBridge Books and Imagine Books. Prior to that, I had done a number of books for New York publishers and was vice president of a large national writing organization. So I've been on both sides of this equation. We publish Dana Farrow Francis. We have published some John Hartness. One of our newer urban fantasy authors who's just getting a great reaction and welcome is L.R. Braden.
And I was going to say that Deb also has the difficult task of editing me. So
yes. No, he's a breeze.
Yeah, I'm afraid of her, so I just do what she tells me. So Lynne, what do you bring to this circus?
So my name is Lynne Hansen, and I am a book cover artist who specializes in horror. I've been doing this professionally for 10 years. I also worked for 6 years as senior editor at a small press publishing company. So I absolutely love helping connect readers and authors.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. And Lucienne, since your work comes in first in the process, except for when I'm writing and when Deb finally finishes that book she's still got under contract. Pretty sure that editor's retired now.
No, she's not.
And we just hope she won't be watching this. So Lucienne, since your work starts from the beginning, why don't you take us through some of the stuff that you do with an author even before the book's ready to happen?
Okay. Well, this is from pitch to publication, right? So let's talk about the pitch. So are we starting with how you interest an agent, or are we talking about the pitch that an agent does to interest a publisher?
We can go both ways.
Okay. I've been doing a psych marathon watch, so I've heard it both ways. So that's why I wanted to check.
Okay.
So let's talk first about what might interest an agent. So first of all, you want to, of course, look on the agent's guidelines and make sure that you are interesting an agent in the right way and not the wrong way. So follow the guidelines. Don't try to think you're more special or more clever or whatever and skirt around everybody else, because that's a good way to go unread. We give you guidelines so that we can make sure that we can keep track of all the submissions, and that is really the best way to get to us. And so that we can, again, keep track and make sure that you're getting answers in a timely manner. So follow orders that already tells us that you are behaving professionally, and then do an amazing pitch. So you put all the work into the manuscript, make sure you put an equal amount of work into your pitch. Write a great professional pitch that tells us what your book is about, who your main characters are, what the tension is, what the internal and external conflict, all of that. So give us an interesting pitch that makes us go, oh, that's a story I need to read. it makes us request it. And then we request it, and you've written this amazing manuscript, and we ask for it. So this is when our work begins. So we've asked for it, we've fallen in love with it, we've said, yes, we want to work with you, and we've sent you our contract, or we've told you what our terms are, and you've said, yes, we want to work with you too, and now we're working together, and now we're talking about the agent's pitch. Now, very often the agent's pitch, we may start out with your pitch, because of course you interested us with that pitch. However, this may or may not be the kind of pitch that's going to interest the publisher. So we know the kind of words that you have to use. We may, you may have written a pitch that may interest us, but we may need to put it in more active terms than passive terms that you might have used, or we might need to, you might have written it a little bit too vague or back cover copy, and we might need to use some more specifics and put it in more terms of some words that are going to really interest a publisher, maybe more on voices and diversity, or maybe some things that basically let the publisher know why this is special and why it rises above, because we know that we might have seen 20 books that sounded all alike last week, and how to make this book not sound like all those other books that we saw last week, but makes it sound just how special it is. And so we can pick out the parts that made the book really stand out and really special for us. And very often an author is so close to their work that trying to describe it, the hardest thing, sometimes the hardest thing in the world for an author to do is encapsulate their work. They have spent months and months writing it, and sometimes it is much harder to summarize your work than it was to write it to begin with, and we know that. And so that for us is part of where we come in and do the pitch. And very often when I send the pitch to the authors, they'll go, oh, that's way better than my pitch. And it's not because we're so amazing, although we are. I mean, you know, because we're at a distance and we can say, this is what excited me about your work, because we have that distance. So that's the pitch for us. And it's what we use to get the publishers excited about your work. So
now, when you're selecting a publisher, because obviously there are presses of all different sizes, and you have sold books to presses of all different sizes.
Right.
I know, because I have 3 of them coming out in the next 60 days. And we're about as small as it gets. So, but you've also sold some books to all of the biggest presses out there. How do you decide where to start? Are there some books that you feel like are a better fit for a small to mid-size press, or does everything start at New York?
Well, you know, it depends. I mean, when we've taken on a new author, usually we've taken somebody on intending to build their career and really do big things with their career. And so we're intending for it to go to New York and to do big things. And that's usually the intention. That's usually where it's going to get the big money and the big focus and things like that. So that's usually the intent. Although once we're working with an author, we know that not every project is going to be right for a big press, and not every project is going to go from New York. So some are going to be more niche projects, or are going to go smaller and things like that. And that is good too. And a lot of authors want to write a whole lot of different things and don't want to be pigeonholed just writing one thing, and want an agent who can work with them in all the directions that they want to go. So, you know, we really work based on the needs of the project and the author, and, you know, and it's a group effort, it's a collaborative effort with the author and based on, again, the project.
So an author doesn't need to fear that if they sign with an agent, then they're never going to get a chance to work with anybody except the big 5 houses, because you guys work with everyone.
That should be the way it is. I've heard some agents that are only interested if it's going to be blockbuster, and if it's not, then you don't have their attention. There are those agents. And so I think when you're doing your agent research, that, you know, those are some questions you might want to ask, although very often if you're a new writer, you may not necessarily have the choice of, you know, 5 agents, and you know what I mean. But So those agents do exist, but in general, it is a collaboration, it is a relationship, and it's one that should be right for everybody. And there will be a chance to leave that agent if it turns out that they're not right for you.
Now, we've seen throughout the writing world, small presses in particular come and go.
Right.
And big presses fold imprints. What does an agent do to try and steer your clients towards the more reputable presses? Do you guys go to conferences to help vet? Do you just know people?
All of the above. We go to conferences, we put our ears to the ground, we look for warning signs. I mean, first of all, there will frequently be red flags in a contract if a publisher is not going to be good to work for. And we make sure, of course, that we don't sign contracts if we can't get the red flags out of there, or if a publisher is not going to negotiate things out, if there aren't going to be out clauses, if there are things like the publisher isn't giving you royalty statements, isn't, is defaulting on their obligations. But usually before we'll work with a press, we'll kind of keep an eye on them at first and make sure that they are fulfilling their obligations. We'll check in with people they've worked with, but usually we'll know the principles. If there's a brand new press with people who haven't been in publishing before, who don't know what they're doing, that's not a press we're going to work with until they've proven themselves. So all of the above, we do go and we meet people, but we'll know the principles. We'll look at their contracts. We'll look at their terms. We'll look for red flags. But usually we're working with presses that we have some information about, who have some history, who have people with prior experience, who we've worked with in the past, good people like you and Deb, and So.
Well, that makes for a good segue, because Deb, when you co-founded BelleBridge, it was half a dozen people who had industry experience.
Right.
So,
I think the group had close to 300 books published with New York. A couple of them had hit the New York Times list. I was the business face of the publisher, and the reason that it all worked for us is I had spent 20 years as a small business consultant, opening businesses, running businesses, those kinds of things were like falling off a log for me. And plus I'd been in publishing and had done, 8 books with Random House at that point. So I knew the business. So it was just a really nice mix that we were able to be set up for success because we had the right tools. But I agree with Lucienne, you have to watch publishers and make sure they're doing things like always paying their royalties on time, that sort of thing. What is their contract like? Is the negotiation with them a normal business transaction, or do they get all huffy if you ask for something? If you're dealing with a normal business person, any contract, there's going to be a conversation about what's in the contract, what they can do for you, what they can't do for you. And normally they can explain, we don't change this clause, and this is why, whatever. This is just, it's a business, and a lot of authors, it's their dream, and so they're afraid to ask for things. Agents are not. We're happy to work with agents. We worked with Lucienne on people before. So, we're happy to do all of that. We're also happy to work with an author without an agent. But I've always told a lot of people that when you're offered a contract, what you should say is, this is so exciting, I can barely breathe. Do you mind if I call you back? Because you're really not in good shape to talk about a contract. I mean, you can talk about in broad strokes and everything, maybe, but generally people, it's their dream, and they want to say yes to everyone or to anyone, because, there are not that many people out there who are paying advances and doing that kind of stuff, doing good marketing work out there. John, I know you do a lot of cons where you're literally behind a table selling somebody's book. You're collaring people, off of the road going, let me tell you about this author. So, there are not as many opportunities to get good, solid publishing as, self-publishing is a whole different animal. So, I think it's that people need to recognize it's a business, and, it's worth making sure you have the right fit and having the right conversations.
So when a book comes to you, either the author has submitted a book or an agent has submitted a book and you love it. We're going to assume from the jump that you can't live without this book. What happens then? And for those of you watching along at home, pretty much everything Deb says works with BelleBooks and BellBridge. Just assume that it works the same way for my press, because I completely I tried to model everything we do off of how she's worked with me for roughly a decade. So
yes, and we've had a long, relationship and many conversations about publishing. For me, if it's something I absolutely love, then I give it to one of my trusted staff members and I say, tell me why I can't buy this. Because it needs to be a good, solid book that works for everybody, not just for me. And, so I will make sure that I'm not missing something, that we're all on board with it. Because I'm sure, like you, John, and Lucienne, you probably can speak to this, publisher schedules are built very far out. And often we can't keep buying books because we've just found so many we love, and we've got to hold spots. We've got to publish the authors that we're currently publishing, because we do like to develop our authors. So we've got to hold space for them. But when I love that book, I do have to be very careful about what space I have. So I will read it. I will give it to somebody to read. Then we'll have a conversation about it. And then I will talk with the author and or agent. And I'll be very clear about what kind of editing I think the book needs, what I love about the book, how we work, because it's not just, hey, I love your book, here's a little bit of money and let me have your book. It's going to be miserable if we don't understand each other. If we, and I'm a fairly hands-on editor and fairly hands-on with development. And if somebody's got a precious baby, then I'm not a good spot for them. We have other editors that, we try to keep everything really in-house, very tightly controlled. But, most of us are going to give good, strong editorial feedback, revision. We can probably get into the stages of editing after that, or do you want me to do that now?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
Okay.
Because I feel like one of the complaints I hear from friends who have worked with startup presses and small presses, and now even with some major presses, is lack of editorial. Lucienne?
Actually, yeah, before we get into the editorial editing, I just want to jump in here, because I want to say, before a manuscript actually ever goes out for submission to editors, most agents will also work editorially. So when you're actually looking at agents, you do want to ask, are they an editorial agent, things like that, because most agents do work editorially with the authors before the work even goes out, which does not mean you are not also going to get edited by the publisher, because of course you will. There are going to be more rounds of editing once it goes out, because what we're trying to do is get it in a wonderful shape, because there is so much competition out there that you can't let something go out in a less than wonderful condition, so that an editor can fall in love with it, so that you don't want it to go out in a shape where they're going, no, it just needs too much work and I just don't have time to deal with it. You want it to go out where they can go, wow, this is amazing. I can see that it still needs some tweaks, but wow. And we can drop this into the schedule because it does not need that much work. So I just want to be clear that there is an editing pass or an editing process before it even goes on submission. And now I'll let you go into that, but I just wanted authors to be prepared for that. They are going to probably get editorial notes from the agent even before it goes out, so that it can be in wonderful shape before you all see it. But go ahead.
And there are also cases where they'll get revise and resubmits from the agent before they're signed with the agent, right?
Right. I'm working with a young man right now who I met at your con, John, Saga, probably the last con that I'll have been able to go to for a long time. But he submitted based on meeting me there, telling me about the book, and I said, sounds good, send it in. Wonderful writer. However, there were some major issues, large issues. So I sent a note back to him and said, I can't make an offer at this time, but what I will do is I will give you some very detailed feedback, and if you would like to revise and resubmit, I'd be happy to look at it again. So I sent him a wealth of information, and
I laugh because I use my experience with Deb picking up the Black Knight Chronicles, the series I have with Bellbridge, as my example to authors of what editorial from a publisher needs to look like, and to prove to them that I'm not that rough on them. My books have been self-published and sold well. And when Deb picked up the series, she said, you know, we're going to take these apart and we're going to put them back together. So I thought, grammar, maybe we tweak a little. 14 pages worth of edit letter.
It was a wonderful, wonderful series, but we just had some opportunities to make it stronger, better, tweak the arc, deepen the characters, all of that kind of stuff. And it's still John's book, and it's sort of, you know, exactly what he sent, except more, deeper, whatever.
Looking back now, I can't tell which pieces of those original books came from the first run or were things that we tweaked and massaged.
Yeah. So strong editorial is about lifting your book to as high a piece of art as it can be. It's not about an editor writing your book. Those edits are not because I want your character to do this. No, it's about logic and increasing the conflict, making sure you have enough emotional conflict and motivation, making sure you've picked the right scenes to showcase what your theme is and, you know, your arc and all that kind of stuff. So I sent him these notes, and he sent back 50 pages and said, you know, is this what you mean? And I went, yeah, that never happens. People, you know, change 4 words and send it back. They don't usually dig in. And, you know, I said, okay, you're on deck. Finish the whole book. There'll be more edits later. But yes, I will definitely look at this again. So you could get a revise and resubmit if we really love it, but I know that it's going to be a lot of work, and I don't know how you are to work with or if you're going to accept what I need you to do. And if it doesn't need that kind of overhaul, then we'll go ahead and go to contract. We'll have that contract discussion. You know, here's our contract, here's our offer, ask your questions, whatever, we'll deal with your agent, whatever. And then we will do, the first round of editing is going to be a revision with the author, which is the 10-page letter and all kinds of notes in the manuscript. It's not just changing a word. My first edits, and every editor is different, but I'm telling you why I'm making the edit. It's not because I think, you know, burgundy sounds better than red. There's a reason, you know, for every editorial change, I can tell you why I am requesting that you do this or suggesting. So you'll get that big meaty edit. You'll do the revision, you'll send it back. We'll do a line edit, which is a real ticky-tacky type of edit. It's not this big overhaul. It literally is line by line, looking at, hey, is your clause? It's not grammar. It's more about, is your clause in the right place to forward the thought to the next thing? I tend to do a lot of line edits along with my revision letter, just how my brain works. And then it goes into a copy edit round where a copy editor will pick it apart for grammar. And even then the author can say, hey, I like the semicolon, or, you know, and we'll have that conversation. We have a house style, but, you know, we tend to lean on Chicago Manual of Style. And if you want to argue with me, bring it from CMOS and we'll have a conversation.
And there's the question of when X-Men is and is not italicized.
Yes. You would be amazed at the things you get involved in fact-wise. Yeah. You're just thinking, okay, yeah, we got to go check that.
Yep.
So,
Talking about
so
a
that
team
back,
of mutants. When you're talking about the superhero team, it's not italicized. But when you're talking about the comic or the movies, it is. And some of your nerd writers might use it both ways in the same manuscript.
oh, absolutely.
And if your copy editor isn't a giant nerd, they might not get that.
Well, then you've got Fae, Fairy, and Fairy. How are you going to spell it? Is it spelled one way this way, one way that way? What are you going to call them? Are you consistent? That's what a copy edit does for you. Our copy edits usually come back with style sheets, which is this is every character name, this is this, and we provide those to the authors for future books. We really like it when the author sends us a style guide on things like that to begin with. You know, these are my characters or whatever. And then you look at that copy edit, then it comes back to us. Then production gets done on it where we get files, and you're going to see we do print and ebook publication same time on every book we do. So you're going to get a page proof that comes back from production, which is what the book looks like when we're going to publish it. And we have a proofer go over that, then you're sent that, and that's your last chance to fix any little typos or a left out word, or doesn't mean we won't fix something later if we find an error, but we prefer things go out absolutely 100% clean if we can manage it. So that's your last chance to look at that, and then the book goes into the actual final production, ebook production stage, and gets out into the world.
And one thing that's important for people who are self-publishing and haven't worked with a print house before, those page proofs will be off of the print edition of the book, because nobody knows what your book is going to look like based on the e-reader and the font size. So you can't tell where the breaks are going to be in a word or a line, because I read on both of these devices.
Exactly.
My iPad and my phone, and
exactly.
I'm old, so
You can change your
reading glasses determines the size of the font.
Yeah, and it's not just your display screen; it's the size of the font that you choose on that individual device. So there are many tweaks that the reader can make, but we will do our page proofs off what the printed book is going to look like. That gives us our page count, all that kind of stuff.
And when things are like verses of songs or poems, you can see what it's really going to look like in the fixed form.
Right, because it's not dynamic the way an ebook would be. And speaking of songs, please do not quote song lyrics. We have to take them out. You know, you can use something that's public domain, you know, Barrett's quotes, you know, Shakespeare from, you know, 1600s. Yeah, that can go in there. But we don't want any song lyrics, because that is just a nightmare and will cost everybody a lot of money, and we're going to make you take it out anyway. So, you know, don't do that. That's just not going to fly.
All of those Stephen King books, and we know he uses Bruce Springsteen songs as epigraphs. And when you're making Stephen King money, you can too. But until then,
Yeah, just getting the permissions, you know, it's just, you know.
One of my authors spent 3 months tracking down the permissions for 3 lines of a song that he wanted to quote. Because when it came to me, I said, cut this. He said, well, what if I can find the permission? I said, if you can find the permission and you're going to pay for it, knock yourself out. But I'm not paying to license ELO lyrics.
Yes, and if I don't have written permissions in my hand, then it doesn't go in the book. And we've done books where, you know, different things have needed permissions, and that's fine. But those are generally the author's responsibility to provide those permissions. It's not the publisher's responsibility to go and get them. So, you know, every author is going to sign a warranty that says, hey, you know, I'm not doing anything illegal here, which, you know, is easily avoided by simply not doing anything illegal, you know. So.
However, you can use a song title. So if the lyric is the title, you can use the title, but you cannot use the song lyrics. Yeah.
And exactly. As someone who has a deep-seated loathing for coming up with book titles, literally almost every book I've ever written is a stolen song title.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Almost all of them. And just for the record, the rights holder for those ELO lyrics did grant them for free.
Oh, very nice.
Very nice. Doesn't always happen. That's why you can't count on it, though.
Yeah.
Right. I was blown away when it happened. I mean, I've
Mhm.
used song lyrics from songwriters that are friends of mine, but and epigraphs. If you want to use a quote at the beginning of every chapter from a character in the book, remember that you're going to have to do that for every chapter of every book in the series. As one of my epic fantasy authors was reminded to his chagrin when I sent him back the layout notes for his book and said, so in book 1, you had a quote from your character 20 years after the events of this book in every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go do that now.
Readers like consistency. They feel like they're missing out on something if you open a can of worms and they don't find any worms. So, you need to keep that in mind. We're all serving the reader here.
Yeah.
That is the primary purpose, is to grow brand, grow reader identification. And so that's one of the reasons that when we talk about developing authors, we will keep an author with the same editor. I won't edit one book and then hand that author off to have somebody else edit that book, because it's important that we're all singing off the same sheet of music and that we all understand where we're going, what the idea for the author is. I don't know that every press is like that, but at BelleBooks and Bellbridge and Imagine, that's what we very much try to do. There's been the odd time when we've switched an editor, but not very often. So
we try to do the same thing. A lot of times, though, if I start a series, after 1 or 2 books, I may move the series off to another editor that I think will be a good fit, if I've figured out that they're going to be a good fit for the house and that they're going to work well with other editors. But
yeah,
similar to you, I have authors that are mine.
mm-hmm.
And then some authors that come in with more publications as opposed to brand new authors, we might have to flip a coin on the editorial side for who gets them.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little horse trading this year between me and Melissa about who got to do some of the books that we've released this year.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I made her give me a book that I wanted to play with in exchange for her getting the next Golgotha books.
And I think it's all about author expectation, and you want to work with a publisher who has conversations with you. Rather an email, I'm an email creature. I don't know that you really want to work with a publisher who never has time for you, can't answer your emails, that kind of thing. So I just bought an author. John, you may know this author, and
I'm thrilled.
We think it's going to be great. And the more we had conversations and the more we thought about it, I thought that we had an editor that would be much better for her, because it gave her more room for growth based on what I know she can do in other genres, in other areas, and where she can lean and go. And so, I had a conversation, and the other editor said, I want her. And I said, okay, well, let me see if I can make this happen. And so that conversation happened, and they're on their little merry way now, which is great. So lots of things can happen, but it's about communication. And I'm sure, that's the hallmark of everything, because along the editing process, we have other stuff we're doing, not the least of which is cover that gets fit in there with all of that stuff.
Lucienne,
Speaking of which, Lynne has been, I've been trying to grab Lynne in because she's been so patient over there, and we haven't grabbed Lynne in to talk about covers.
Yeah.
So, and you just segued to covers, so let's grab her in.
Well, and Lynne is sitting back there thinking, I make pretty pictures and Jeff has to deal with all of this other stuff. Because Lynne also has the unfortunate distinction of living with a writer.
Well, we've been married 23 years. Actually, Sunday was our 23rd anniversary.
Happy
Ours
anniversary.
too.
That's awesome. Do you
Yeah.
get a medal for that? Because ours is 25 in December, and my wife has decided that given the current health issues of the world, we probably can't do a big trip. So like a Purple Heart, maybe.
Oh.
So Lynn, you get to communicate with everybody, nobody. How does a cover come to you?
So most of my work is, the largest amount of my commissions are for Cemetery Dance, which is the world's largest independent publisher of horror. So I do a lot of work for them. I do a lot of work for other independent horror publishers. I work with Thunderstorm Books, Bloodshot Books, Raw Dog Screaming Press. I have, and then I also work directly with authors who are self-publishing. And a huge chunk of the work that I do are actually authors who have been published elsewhere and have gotten their rights back, and now they're ready to publish the books again, or they're books that have been out that they've self-published themselves. I do a lot of rebranding work because people don't realize that all the steps that are involved with getting a book into a reader's hands that they are so excited about, because it requires all of that editorial work and all of that prep work, whether or not you are independently published or professionally published. That stuff all has to get done still. And so I actually do a lot of, especially with self-published authors, I do a lot of guidance and nurturing towards those resources because it's really important, because it doesn't do any good for me to make an amazing cover for them and then they haven't edited the book, they haven't done the interior formatting so that it is professional. I mean, that they don't have any plans to market the book. Like, having a good cover isn't going to solve all of those other problems. It's not going to give the book legs. And if that book doesn't have legs, they don't come back to me. So it's in my best interest.
Nobody sees your gorgeous cover.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I work with any client, I always ask them to send me links to 3 book covers in their genre that they love. I ask them to tell me, to complete this sentence: fans of blank's book blank will love my book. Because I think, Lucienne, what you were saying at the very beginning, I think I always ask authors for also their ideas or what they would like to see on their covers. But I feel that I come in as an artist with a blank slate, right? So I am not the agent or publisher that fell in love with the book. I am not the author who spent their heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears writing this book. I come in cold like a reader. And so when I look at a book, I also ask for the back cover description, because my philosophy for design is every cover starts out its life this big, right? And so it better read like something, like the kind of book that a potential reader is looking for. It needs to be identifiable as that author's book if you have a fan base. And you need to have some questions. Oh, this looks interesting. Let me click on it. Oh, now it's this big. And when you click on it that big, it better not be like, oh, look, it's bigger. It better be like, oh, I did not notice that. Now I have more questions. Let me flip over and read that book description. And so if my cover leads people into that book description, by the time they've finished reading that book description, they've interacted multiple times with the book, which makes them more likely to actually click buy or take it home, right? And so that is, so my process is, so when I'm working on a piece, and it's so hard, like Lucienne, like you were saying, it's just so hard to distill it down to what is the core of the story when people have been working so long and hard on this. I mean, and when I come in with clean eyes and can look at this and say, oh, this is the thing in the story that if they see my cover and they get to this point in the story, they're going to feel like they got what they were looking for, right? Yeah. And so that it connects there. And I try very hard to make sure that that thing is not the thing that is the big climax, the big action sequence at the end that you want on the cover.
Right.
Right. You want to lead people into the story.
Right. You want to intrigue and not give it away. Yep.
Right. But still set them up for the expectation that this is the kind of book that I like. I know what I'm getting into. It is totally the same and absolutely different than everything else. Right? I think specifically in indie horror, the more unique a cover is, the more it can connect with that readership, especially like when I work with limited edition publishers where like in the limited edition market, they'll have a very small print run, they'll go out and the books will be sold out, in a day. And so it gives you that opportunity to do something really cool and trick and funky with it. Whereas if you're working more towards a more mainstream publisher, you really have to know what the publisher's expectations are too. I think one of the reasons that I've worked with Cemetery Dance for all of these years now, I guess we're 6 years I've been working for Cemetery Dance. And I've been a fan of Cemetery Dance since issue 1 of their magazine. Like I know their voice for 20 some years. And so it's very, very exciting to get to create book covers for them.
Sure.
And so figuring out that publisher's voice and the books that represent them well is something that is really important as well. So you need that author's voice, but it's also about connecting in a way that, hopefully an author has a publisher that also has a fan base that says, oh, look, these guys publish really good books. Yeah. And so you need to have that identification as well.
Right.
So,
I think that one of the most successful covers of yours that I've seen as far as telling that story, you can actually see it over your shoulder, over your right shoulder, right? This Haunted Forest Ride. And I think that's...
Bring it to the camera. Let us see it.
Hold on.
Because that cover, for me, I knew both of the guys. I knew the writers. I knew that they could tell a story. And I had read some stuff by them, but I'd never read anything that they did together. So that cover, I was like, okay, I'm in. And you were saying exactly the truth. That's not the climax of that story by a long shot.
Oh, it's pretty much the inciting incident, right?
Yeah, it's actually.
So if you think that this is a book about giant monsters coming out of the forest and attacking trams load of tourists, you're right.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in this book. And
it's kind of like if Jurassic Park was full of imps. And they were pissed.
It is, and this book was it's still one of my favorite pieces because the book had been around with 3 different publishers over 10 years when Jeff and Jim got their rights back. And so this is a book that's been around for 10 years. They both have good fan bases. Any of their fans who had wanted to read that book had already read that book. And I did a brand new cover. And we did all the interior formatting again, cleaned everything up, made it nice and pretty, and put it out. And it became both of their best-selling books for a while, a 10-year-old book.
Nice.
There was movie interest in it. It got picked up from Tantor for audio rights. And it's a book that had been around for a really long time. So it's really, really important to have a book cover that connects with the book so that you can connect with those readers.
So Deb, when you are working with a cover artist, and Lucienne, you as well, how often is it that you, especially Lucienne, how often is it that you see a cover before it's, hey, here's the cover?
We frequently, I mean, as an agent, the author and I frequently see the cover before, you know, it gets let out into media and everything, but, and frequently we love it, but even when we don't, I mean, sometimes we can get changes, sometimes we can't. Sometimes the publisher shows it and it's like Barnes and Noble will say, well, you know, we're not going to take a lot of buys based on this cover, but if we were to change it, we would up our order, or, you know, so sometimes the publisher will make changes not so much based on us, but based on what their accounts will tell them, or, you know, whatever. So sometimes we have an effect on the cover, sometimes the accounts will have an effect on the cover. Sometimes our voice gets heard, sometimes it doesn't get heard. But frequently the publisher will show us, they'll show us like 3 or 4 versions of a cover. And it might be that the versions just have different font. It might be that the fonts have different colors. It might be the different backgrounds. For instance, one of my authors who writes romance, historical romance, they had different backgrounds or clenches or you know, and we had some different options, which do you like best, and we sort of mixed and matched and played around, and we had real input on the cover, which was wonderful, and you don't always get that kind of input, especially with the larger presses. So sometimes with the smaller presses you get more input, sometimes you don't. It varies quite a great deal, and sometimes that's based on you know, production time, sometimes it's based on cost, sometimes it's based on, I mean, it's based on so many things. So sometimes we have input and sometimes we don't, I guess is the answer. But it's also based on contract, like sometimes we have cover approvals or consultation, or, you know, obviously we always would like to have approval, but we don't always get it. And like I said, for you know, good reason. Sometimes it costs a lot to redo a cover or things like that. Or just like I said, sometimes the timeline involved is just not such that we're always going to get a chance to approve every time. And the bigger the author, the more chance you have of getting approval and things that you would really like to have in a contract. And also, you know, we're talking book contracts. So things like film and things like that, everybody always likes to like blame the author if a film adaptation isn't the way that they wanted it or something. But what people don't realize is that if you're Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or something, you've got a lot of clout. If you're not, then frequently you don't get a lot of input. And you know, usually they'll do with it what they want to do with it. So blaming the author usually for these sort of things is something the author kind of throws up their hands and is like, oh, look, you don't know the way these things work.
It's like blaming the author for the price of an ebook.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
Right.
the author legitimately usually has 0 input in.
Right. Unless it's a self-published book. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
From the publisher perspective, we ask our authors, they have cover consultations, just a given with our contract. You know, we're happy to have that process, but there is an end to it at a certain point. Sometimes you have to say, hey, we're going with this. But we ask them to fill out something called an art fact sheet, except for John, because we've been working with him so long. We don't, you know. Yeah, we know what's going to go on his cover. And he has an established style. So part of the conversation we have with the author, I love that Lynne needs what we also feel we need. We ask them to give us read-alikes and look-alikes because they're not the same. So that's covers they like plus who they believe they write like. lots of information about the book. And, you know, they give us the blurb and all of that. But if you ask them to suggest a scene or something for the front of the book, and we let them do that because they have to, that just gets it out of their system. But it's going to be so incredibly specific that Lynn's laughing, because this is, I mean, it's just like a laundry list. It's, you know, 2 pages long describing one scene. So, you know, that doesn't work really well because we, you know, it's like, hey, it's a thumbnail, guys, and then it gets bigger, and, you know, so we're working from that. But part of the conversations we have to be on top of and have with the author and then with the cover artist, is this part of a series? Are we branding the author? Is this one-off from their brand? We don't want it to look anything like their brand. We have to have those conversations so that we end up with a cohesive product. And I don't like to play the game, which is called let's irritate the artist. That's never good. So I don't like to torture them. I like to have a very good idea of a direction before we go to an artist or begin to develop a cover if we're developing it in-house or something, so that we can everybody be on the same page, and our tweaks then will come down to small things. These, you know, these are it's a placeholder quote, or we might look at several different fonts or something like that, but we don't have, well, let's redo the entire art for the cover. You know, when we did John's first cover, I don't know if you had been anywhere handy, but it happened to be they were putting zombies in the back of a taxi cab. And so, you know, I was trying to explain it to the artist, and she's going, I don't quite get it. I mean, you know, because it's zombies in a taxi cab. So I literally went and got, you know, art from one of the art sides and did the world's worst job ever, and shoved some zombie legs in a trunk and put a figure there and said something vaguely like this. And she goes, oh, that's great. And then we got a cover that was completely different and way better. So, you know, we try to be really clear and have that communication. Lynn, I'm guessing you appreciate clear communication too?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's so important to listen to the publisher, to listen to the author, to understand what they want. And I do something that is very weird, in that I am not a big fan. I don't like to send sketches. I don't like to send drafts. I love to talk about what is the core. I always read all of the books, because I think that's really important to me. It doesn't mean that I read the entire book. I read enough to get to the point where I know this is the thing. But it is, I would much rather send a polished, finished piece and to have somebody say, oh no, and do another one, than to send a draft and tell people, trust me, it will look good when it's done. Because oh no, I think in the 10 years that I've worked as an artist, I think it may have happened 3 times that I've redone a cover. So I'd much rather go through and just give a polished piece based on all of that prep work that we did together as a team, and be able to share that, as opposed to saying, oh, trust me, it'll look good when it's done. Some people don't have the ability to understand what that means. And
you do have to be careful when you're working with an author. Some authors have a greater degree of abstract thinking when it comes to what the end product's going to be, and other authors are more literal, and you know, it's not helpful for them when they're looking at a cover like that. Oh, there's somebody in the background of yours, Lynn.
or the cat walking. He's also.
Now, oh, sorry, Lucienne.
Well, I also think some authors are incredibly visual and can be helpful with covers, and others, you know, are not. For instance, I know when I did my first art cover sheets for my first covers, and they were asking me for ideas, I was throwing out ideas, which they thankfully ignored, and went their own way, and theirs were so much better. I mean, my first cover for my first young adult book, Vamp, was so much better than anything I threw out. I mean, so much better. I was like, see, this is why I write, and I'm not an artist. And thank goodness they ignored me. And but no, I just think, and yet I have one of my writers is very visual and does, you know, create some things. And sometimes the art department comes to her with something and she's like, but no. And she comes back and that she sends them something that's better than what they came up with. And thankfully her editor or her publisher is very wonderful about this, actually. Like, they came to her with something and she had a disabled heroine, and you couldn't actually see the wheelchair, for example. And she made it so that you could see the wheelchair, because it was very important to her that you could see the wheelchair. In that, she said that, look, people have been waiting for this story, and if this story comes out and it was like you were trying to hide the fact that, you know, that's going to be a problem. And anyway, and they, you know, took very well to it and everything else. And she is very visual and she does an amazing job with this. So some writers, I think, are very helpful and useful and wonderful in that area. And then there's me. So I think also, you know, I think authors need to know too when to step back and you know, and when to be very grateful to people like you, Lynn, for being able to achieve the vision and to.
Your publishers get scared when your query or pitch comes in, and I've attached my cover. It's like, no, you're way too married to this whole thing. I can't. This may be a person that I can't work with because they don't understand how publishing works. And they're really already attached. You know, you can't tell them to kill their baby, here's a new one. They don't take that very well. So,
Yeah,
John, do you get those covers with your queries?
well, not very much, because we've been closed to submissions for a year and will be closed for another year, unless they are agented or I meet them or they watch these videos and email me, john@falstaffbooks.com. You can email a query. That's what you get for doing this stuff. But I have once agreed to a cover before the contract was signed. But Natanya Barron does about a third of the covers for our company.
Yeah.
So I feel like, since
Low
she's
risk there.
one of my primary cover artists, that, yeah, I'm not going to make anybody else do a cover for her, because that would be crazy making.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that Deb brought up, and Lynn, I know that you've had some very recent experience with this, is making sure that a series has a cohesive look. And I know, speaking for myself, when I started with the Bubba the Monster Hunter books, the first collection looked an awful lot like a 7th grader put some clip art into Photoshop and slapped some Times New Roman font on there, because that's about the level of Photoshop skill I had when I made that cover, and that is the font I used. But a year or two ago, I went back and rebranded the entire series, and you just went through this with a series of Jeff's, right?
I did. I just finished. Oh, look, I have them. Look, I have props.
And it's, for those of you following along at home, it's rare that an artist gets to see their cover image in a 24 by 36 inch format, but that's the art that Lynn did for our limited edition Quincy Harker Omnibus. And it's actually level, my computer isn't.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, I went to Easy Canvas Prints and made a wall hanging, because I knew I was going to be I was redoing my office, and I was like, I want that.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I love that.
So tell us about this. This is the Andrew Mayhem series, right?
Right, and these books, the 20th anniversary of the first Andrew Mayhem book was in May. And these are horror, thriller, comedy, very funny books. and they had, they were some of the first covers that I ever did when he got the rights back for those. Those were some of the early book covers that I did. And so we wanted to do something that transitioned more and spoke more to, not only does he have that strong horror fan base, but he also has a strong kind of a thriller, psychological suspense fan base. So we wanted something that connected with both, and then also spoke to the humor. But the humor part was really easy because the books are like Grave Robbers Wanted, No Experience Necessary, Single White Psychopath Seek Sane.
The books are also great. By the way, it's one of, I think that the first Andrew Mayhem book was the first book of Jeff's that I read. So they're very good.
It's, and so for this, I wanted to create something that, because the books had multiple publishers over the years, and some of them have done kind of, and they've had foreign rights, and they've had all these different versions of the covers. And I wanted to do something that really let Jeff's identity and the titles pop, but also spoke to that one-ad kind of aspect of all of the books. You know, the advertising.
We'll them up so we can see them together because they're great as a series.
Well, and this
is a really nice brand.
There is also, hold on. The other thing that I did with them is, so they all have spines. So they're numbered across the bottom here, and then this is actually the little Andrew Mayhem logo. Here when we get to do the bundled version, the collection. But it is, I don't know if I can actually hold up all of them. But when you see close up, there is that kind of one ad feel to the typography. Mm-hmm. And then all of the colors correspond across the back.
Nice.
And have a consistent look. And the other thing that was really fun was being able to know, because they are part of a series, is that I was able to create so that you can see all the other books in the series in the event that you pick up book 3 in the midst of it all.
Nice.
But then took and used things like, so each one has its kind of iconic element. So Grave Robbers has its shovel, and that's also like the little section break, things like that, that kind of create that whole cohesive feel to these books. And at this point in Jeff's career, the original covers I actually had done photo shoots with, but at this point in Jeff's career, what's really important is Jeff's name, nice and readable, and those titles really nice and readable, and something that really distinguishes them apart, but as part of a unit. And and then because he had these other 4 books, to celebrate the 5th, to celebrate his 20th anniversary, he wrote the 5th book in the series that just came out. So.
And that book is titled?
Cemetery Closing, Everything Must Go.
So you guys who are at home, you can pause the video and go buy that.
I don't even have my my final version of that yet because it just came out today.
And because author copies from literally everyone take twice as long this year as they do in normal years.
They take twice as long from when you place the order. I mean, literally, they've been changing the print times. You place an order with one ridiculous print time, and then they change that after that. So it's been ridiculous.
Although they are still just as fast to bill you for those printed copies.
Yes, they are.
So that is kind of how it happens. And then everybody gets their author copies and their agent copies, and the publisher may or may not have 3 bookcases in their home full of trade show inventory that's going unutilized this year because of 2020. And then there's a book. And we'll come back at some point and talk about distribution and different ways that people actually sell a book. But I feel like this has given folks a really good timeline for how books get made. And especially for somebody like me who came in as a self-published author, I would have had no idea all of the work that Lucienne puts in to a book before it ever gets to someone like Deb. And now that I'm on the publisher side, I get to deal with all of you people. And, you know, one thing that I've found to be very helpful when you're having those conversations with a cover artist is if you just go to their website and give them comps off of the stuff they've already done, they dig that.
They totally do.
Because the art sheet I sent Lynn a couple of weeks ago was, okay, I like the texture from this and the point of view of this and the typography of this, and here's a copy of the book, read it and figure it out.
And she was happy with that.
I was very happy with that. And I mean, I think the other thing, I am so grateful to get to do the thing that I love the most every single day of my life. I mean, I currently have 64 book cover commissions in my queue.
Whoa, you go, girl.
People are amazing in that they plan ahead, right? So like 12 of those are, I have an author who is doing one book a month for the next year. So they've planned and booked me out for the next year. And so that is so helpful. And I think that goes with any professional. People need to remember that although they love you, or else they wouldn't be working with you, they also have other people that they work with that they love and that they need to do these other things too. So you need to be patient and let the professionals do the things that they do, whether they're editing, whether they're going through the publishing process, whether they're trying to sell the book for you. You need to give them the time to do their job well, because in the grand scheme of things, an extra 3 months is not going to destroy you, but it could really, really help you.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that just real quickly. On an author that we am I coming through? On an author that we recently published, well, it's been over a year now. We, in conversation with their agents, everybody knew what was going on. We bought 3 books because it's a series, and now we've gone back to contract for more. But we held that first book. We edited it. It was in the can. It was done until we had the second book so that we could come out with that series in kind of a 1-2 punch. So, authors kind of need to know that too, that they may be dealing with multiple books at one time, doing revisions on one, copy edits on another, cover for this one, it all kind of gets mixed up together. But that's sort of how you have to look at publishing. What's the best approach for the author, for the book, what's going on. And some of that is, can you get the copy editor you want? Can you get the cover artist you want? Because you do have to book wherever. So, it's a really good idea for folks to know that it's not an instantaneous process. You sign a contract and your book isn't necessarily out 3 months later.
Right.
Us, it's probably going to be more like 9 months, from the time you turn your book in for us to get through everything.
So yeah,
well, in 3 months, just thinking about, like, if you haven't heard from someone because of the next step in the process and it takes a while, that's what I meant. Not that it takes 3 months for a book to come out, but that however long it takes to hear back because a professional is taking the time that they need to make your book the very best it can be.
Mm-hmm.
That does raise a really good point, so that we can help manage people's expectations. Lucienne?
Well, I was going to say, talking about timelines, I mean, it also depends. If you're a debut author, your timeline is going to be a little bit longer for a couple of reasons. One is there's probably going to be at least one extra editorial pass because you're going to be newer to the process. You're probably going to have a little bit more of a learning curve with the editorial process, with doing revisions, things like that. But also, there's going to be a longer curve with getting the marketing department up to speed, with getting their accounts, with getting everybody excited and on board with you. So because marketing hasn't worked with you, because their accounts aren't familiar with you, there's going to be a longer timeline. They're going to want ARCs out and available earlier. ARCs are advanced reading copies. So whether they are print or whether they're digital, they're more and more digital these days. They're going to want those available in advance and get them out to key people, key buyers, key bloggers, just key people, to get them familiar with your book, talking about your book, to get buyers buying the book, to get them out to, basically a lot of people who are not yet familiar with you, to get them familiar with you and excited about you. There's a lot more gearing up that has to happen for a debut novelist than somebody who's already a household name or somebody who they're already familiar with. So there's going to be a longer lead time needed to give people a chance to read you, and to give people a chance to do all the publicity and promotion and marketing that's called for. And publicity and marketing are different. So one is sort of marketing you to accounts and to sales and things like that, and marketing you to blogs and to get picked up on various things, and other, one is ad placement and things like that. So there's just so much that needs to happen. If you want to look at all the different people involved in making a book, Google It Takes a Village by Lucienne Diver. I did a blog on it a few years ago, and it just talks about even just some of the people who have their hands on your book, from editing to contracts department to publicity to marketing to copywriters to, so many people. So if you're self-publishing, you are the village or you're hiring the village. If you have a publisher, the publisher is the village or is hiring the village for you. But there are so many people involved in getting your book published, and that's why it takes some time. So it's not that the wheels aren't in motion, it's that there are a lot of wheels in motion, and you want them in motion so that they are all working toward getting your work out there and getting you distributed and getting you the attention that you want for your book.
And everyone's got a lead time. If, for instance, someone wants Lynne to do a cover, you've got to wait for Lynne to have an opening in her schedule, or you have, like she said, know you're going to need it and book ahead. So everybody in the village has a lead time. Right. That you're trying to accommodate, so you can get the right pieces in place, for the author, and just little things. I'm sure, Lynne, that when you did those great covers that make such a nice series, the first one was the hardest.
Oh yeah.
After that, it was probably a breeze, right?
Well, but when I work, especially when I work on a rebranding project, I work on all the covers at the same time, because you have to make sure that they coordinate and they work together. You have to have that concept, but then you have to do proof of concept with every book in the series, right? And so even when I work with an author that has a first book and they say it's first book in the series, tell me just a little bit about what else you've got in mind, because then I can at least kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't written those books yet, it helps me kind of see, keep me from making a challenging first cover to create a follow-up for. But it is, the concept is always the toughest part.
So once a book is sold, how long does it take? What's fast?
Oh, you mean after the author signs a contract or accepts an offer from a publisher?
Yeah.
12 months is fast. 12 months is fast. 18 months is more traditional, especially if you're a debut.
my Twitter handle right now, my last Twitter handle when I went to pay attention to one of the Twitter pitch contests, it was John Hartness is reading for 22 and 23.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not. Now I'm reading for 23 and 24.
Right. Because it's not just knowing that you want to do this person. It's probably, we're a smaller press. I mean, we've been around for a long time, but, we try to manage our a list so that we don't get completely overrun. It's so easy to do because there's so many great books you want to publish. But it's probably a good 9 months from the time you hand me a book, if you're under contract and everything. If we're not going through rounds of, revise and resubmit or anything like that. And that's pretty fast for us. But, that's a schedule that is doable. No one wants to crash a book in 3 months because it's not going to be a good product, and you don't want to do that. We literally couldn't turn a book in 3 months. There's just not enough time to do everything that needs to be done. So for us, 9 months is, reasonable unless you're already in our schedule and we already, there's some authors that are just really easy to edit and, so that's a quicker process, but it is not, like you sold your book and it's going to be out in 3 months. That just doesn't happen,
Yeah, for us, there's a lot of difference editorially from a book by Gail Z. Martin, who's got more titles to her credit than I do, versus a brand new author who has not published before, because I know, because when they send me the file names, it's got numbers. I know how many revisions it's been through before their book, Gail co-writes with her husband Larry. I know how many revisions it's been through before I see it. So, and I don't need to do a whole lot of developmental, because someone who's been in the business for 15 years, you know how to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
You better.
Yeah. And reprints are quicker than an original. We have authors that we work with. We're working with their reprints as well as their originals. Different animals, but for an original book, it's going to take a minute to get that all done.
And Lynn, if someone, let's say a self-published author wants to book you, what's your lead time?
Currently, because this summer is kind of chaotic, and I have a lot in the queue already, the next open slot that I probably would have right now would be 2 months out.
That's pretty good.
So considering the fact that, because like I said, I have folks that plan ahead and they say, okay, I'm going to need you this and on this time. And so even though I have a really packed queue, I have slots virtually at any time. But except for this summer, because right now I'm on a big project, followed by an actual vacation.
Oh, no.
Is that allowed this year?
Oh, really?
I know, right? And so normally, and if it's a return client who has a really time sensitive need, I can usually fit them in. But I keep a really good schedule, and I do, and I keep everything kind of balanced so that I've got some flexibility, but I always make my deadlines. And if I give you a time frame, I will make that deadline. And so if that means that I have to say that you're going to be on X date, and it's a little bit further than you'd like, it's just what it's got to be, because you've got to
reality.
Yeah, you've got to keep that balance going. So, and I'm worth the wait.
Well, thank you all. Let's go around real quick and let people know how to find you. And Lucienne has 2 different Luciennes to promote, because there's Agent Lucienne and then there's Author Lucienne. And we'll throw We'll throw author Lucienne a little plug here too.
Okay, well, author Lucienne, well, since we were just talking about covers, and I just happen to have my recent book here. So this is the cover for my recent book, Disappeared. So this is author Lucienne, which is available at Lucienne Diver. Well, not available, it's available everywhere, but you can find author Lucienne at luciennediver.com. And agent Lucienne is at Knight with a K, knightagency.net. There you go.
All right. And Deb?
You can find our website, BelleBooks.com. If you want to email me, and just like John, I'm not really reading any queries that come in, just through the company. Other people read those. But because you watched this and you're a professional and you're doing this, you can email me. It's Deborah Dixon, DebraDixon at BelleBooks.com. That's Bell with an E, like Southern Belle. Deborah Dixon at BelleBooks.com.
And Lynn?
You can find me at LynneHansenArt.com. I'm also Lynne Hansen Art on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. If you sign up for my newsletter every month, I give away a free downloadable calendar. So I always create new art for my list VIPs. And right now I'm currently doing 100 days challenge, where I'm actually showcasing 100 different covers that I've done, one a day, and I'm on day 77 maybe right now. So a good way to kind of see who I am and what I'm about, and it's LYNNEHANSEN art.
All right. Well, thank you all again, and thank you all for joining us for the panel room at Continual, and we will be back next week with even more awesome people. I've been your host, John Hartness. I'll still be John Hartness when we're done, but I won't be hosting you anymore. So y'all go get out there and make something awesome. Bye.
Bye.